The reading for the sermon this morning is taken from John, Gospel according to John, chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through the Word, and without the Word not one thing came into being. What has come into being in the Word was life, and the life was the light of all people. And the light shines in the deepest night, and the night did not overcome it. So this is a famous passage. Many of you are familiar with it. I think hands down this is the most mystical passage of the Bible, meaning it contains mystery. It doesn't immediately make sense. How is it possible the Word is God and the Word is with God? And what is the Word? And why is it capitalized? And there's all sorts of cool things to consider. And this is the beauty about the mystical path, is that the teachings unfold as you progress on the path. So I want to begin speaking to you about the way that human beings communicate. Have you ever sat somewhere and heard two people communicating in a foreign language? And really it just sounds like utterances of sounds. I mean, there's clearly organization to it. But if you have no idea about the language, I mean, there's very little meaning that actually you can glean, except maybe through the facial expressions or the tonality of the people. But to those people who are communicating, a tremendous amount of information is being exchanged, such that you could think of it as having life-altering capabilities. Through the communication, intention is communicated, feeling is communicated, plans are made, questions are asked, connection is made. I remember at various stages in my spiritual journey I would have discussions with people, and there was a sort of school of thought, well, this is what the animals do, so we should probably do the same thing. Kind of like, well, animals are, a lot of the animal groupings, especially the mammals, will have one masculine presence and a lot of female presences, and if another masculine, a male animal comes in, then they fight to the death. And I'm like, and your point is? Is this how you think we should take the example from the animals? Well, keep in mind that the animals don't have the use of the skilled communication of language and word. So they exist at a different level of reality. They don't have the consciousness of the Creator given to them. So it's kind of ridiculous in a way to look at the animal kingdom and go, well, that should be an indication of things that we should do. Because we are given the opportunity to communicate and develop language skills and speak the word, then there really is no reason for physical violence, except the stubbornness of human beings not happy with the other person's word. But that's not really the theme that I want to talk to you about. I want you to understand that this passage is very deep and offers many levels of understanding of what the word is and whether or not you are using it to your highest good. And we don't even know what that highest good is yet. Now I want to make a slight detour because last week we talked about this principle of correspondence. And the principle of correspondence can be summed up in as above, so below. Now many people who interpret this passage, because it goes on to speak about how there was a man who was not the Word, and he came and he gave testimony to the Word, and the Word was made flesh, and everybody goes, well, the Word is Jesus, and Jesus came into the world. Now the correspondence of that which occurs outwardly also occurs inwardly. So here's God going, how am I going to convey to the human beings that within them exists this presence of God known as the Christ, the inner Christ? Well, I'm going to send an individual who is fully embodied in that relationship to represent the presence of the Christ and to become the Christ for the planet. And so Jesus arrives, the Word becomes flesh, and walks around and communicates and speaks the direct Word of God. And for those who receive the Word, they are transformed. So when a teacher speaks and your soul resonates with the particular words, then that can transform you. You receive a new consciousness. Now there's generally a battle period where the soul resists, and if you're not really in touch with the soul, the mind resists. And so there is an element built in where you as a soul have to consent to allow the Word to transform you. And it's optional. And so Jesus did not force the Word upon people. He spoke, and He gave sermons, and He gave teachings. And also, another testament to the Word is that when He noticed somebody that was sick because they couldn't see, they couldn't speak, they had demonic spirits around them, they were dead, they were paralyzed, He would first ask, essentially, do you believe? Do you have faith that I can heal you? And if they said yes, and other times He didn't ask because He just could read the faith in their energy. And so He proclaimed the Word. He would often say, I want it. And that's a testimony to what God inside of you wants to do. So remember, as above, so below. He's operating as the inner Christ, but He's expressing it outwardly so that we have the way to see how this operates and then begin to contemplate how this works inwardly. And by the pronunciation of the Word, the healing took place. So we are to take from that, following this principle of correspondence, that the same dynamic must exist within. That there is a presence of Christ within that has the capability to communicate through the use of word. It doesn't say it's language specific. So any human being is able to hear the Word from within. So that's kind of cool, because then that's why we study the New Testament and Jesus' life, because He is the role model for what this looks like. So He comes into the outer world and acts as the Christ, and within, the Christ comes into your inner world and seeks to proclaim the Word that you would be healed. That to me is like, oh my God, that's so awesome. It's like the epitome of the mystical truth that just makes my soul light up so happy, because there's nowhere to go but within. Now, of course, we study the New Testament because the stubbornness and the hardness of our hearts as a result of living in a difficult world prevents the ease of the transmission of the inner word into the soul, and then finally that we take action upon it. But how encouraging to know that what the passage says, that not one thing comes into being without the Word. So those things which you feel you are lacking, those things which you are struggling to manifest, those things which you can't understand why they don't happen, all you have to do is look at what is the linear flow chart of the inner Word. You know, somebody might say, but I have proclaimed this, I heard this teaching, I took the visualization course, I've read all about this, I've repeated over and over, I have affirmations posted to my bathroom mirror, I read affirmations to myself. Okay, so we're on the right track. The intention is good, but is it possible there's a deeper level of word that is in conflict with your conscious intention? And for those of you, which is almost everybody now, is in retrospection or has been through it, that process begins to help you see at the deeper levels where your word is in conflict with the capital W Word of God, the Word of the Christ. That's difficult to see without help from a guide. If you've ever experienced a teaching from the priest, and part of you went, I got to defend against that because you don't understand, that's a very immediate understanding or experience of where your word is trying to trump the higher word. So, okay, so that helps us understand why our intention does not manifest, or actually it does. So if there is a hardness in there, if there's a tightness in there, if there's an anger in there, if there's a disbelief in there, if there's an anxiety in there, that word has power. That's the word of your soul. And ultimately we want there to be no conflict, a smooth transition or a smooth linear channel from the Word within to the life that I live. And as such, the promise is, I mean, the wording of it is somewhat poetic. Not one thing will come into being without the Word. Or you could say, everything comes into being with the Word. I don't know a teaching that's more promising than that. First of all, you're going to have to figure out what is it that you want. And then you have to be willing to run it by the inner Christ. With this kind of energy. Is this a good thing for me and the earth and the planet and you, God? Would this be a good thing? And if the Word says, I'm not sure. In other words, the Word does not come down on you heavy. God does not dictate, but may create the suggestion that you want to do a little more contemplation about it. And so we have the responsibility, if this makes sense to you, to try to develop that relationship. Now, okay, let's say you're not at the point where you have the relationship, or it sort of comes and goes, and what's actually very common as people are learning to have this relationship is that there are places where they are very loose and the Word flows very nicely and there's no resistance. And then there's other places where their pride and their fear and their past, hurts and their negative belief system creates a constricting channel, and they're afraid to hear the Word. Because what if the Word is just like the people who hurt us? And what if the Word is just like the people who abused power over us? Or the relationships that faltered for me? That's a legitimate fear. And God inside knows it. So even if we're not able to hear the word capital W, we can proclaim our word as soul to go, Lord, liberate me that I may know the truth, that there may be no fear in me to hear your word, that you would speak through me, and that I would have the courage to believe it, to live by that faith, and to implement it. And as you start to realize that that's real, then life becomes very relaxing. Because you recognize that either God is trying to show you through what's showing up in your life where your word is, and if you have cleaned up some of that still negative expression of word, or by what you manifest, you see that this works. I mean, by what it manifests, you see that it works anyway. It's just, it would be nice if there was that smooth, clean connection between the Christ with you, the soul that you are, and the expression of that. This element, this way to interpret the Scripture is just so fascinating to me, because I know a lot of people have this idea that the Bible is this sort of like heavy-handed book that teaches things and it just puts pressure on people, as opposed to what I've always called it, the manual for life, the living word for how to have the most amazing life. The challenge, the planet's a little behind. If everybody was doing this, we'd all be looking around and just marveling at like, wow, check out her word and check out his word and look at what you're creating, and this is so cool. And we wouldn't have these huge attachments to our kids growing up to be this, or our partners have to be this and be that, because we'd realize it's a direct suppression of their word. Now, at the same time, your word can influence and create the possibility for other realities for people that you love, people that you want to help. You really have to be careful, though, that your word does not create resistance to what you want. And so there's a simple understanding that you have to be very responsible to the word that you use. You have to be careful about making casual comments that on some level you really believe, because you are creating in that moment. That creates social pressure, I understand. Because you don't all of a sudden want to be so stiff that you can't say anything except positive affirmations. It's going to be very awkward socially. I wish I had a funny example to give you, but nothing's coming now. The Word was, he says, in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. How cool is that? That the presence of the Christ within you is with God, is always connected to the amazing and unknowable and immense God of the universe. And at the same time, it is God. It is the presence of God within. And it's getting to know that presence is simpler than you think. It's a presence that is consistently and always available for us, each individual, and is not fazed by the ups and downs, but expects them and realizes that we as souls are fazed by them. So it doesn't come down on you when you get fazed. It tries to help you deal with whatever it is that's creating agitation for you. At the same time, you know, if kids are throwing a tantrum, at some point, you know, they've slipped from being hurt and distraught to, you know, in some sort of angry, I'm not talking about toddlers, by the way. You know, I'm talking about kids who have the use of word and have the use of language and are just surrendering to pure emotion. We have to teach them early on that through communication, things can be resolved. Through communication, you can receive what you need and it can change how you feel and how you think. So a few things to note as we go through this week. Number one, really monitor your use of the word as a soul. As a soul, when you speak, you have the opportunity to affect other people. You have the opportunity to create an environment by how you speak and how you carry yourself. Be very hungry to know the capital W word within. Be really, really determined to open your soul and learn the pathway to the direct connection to the Word within, to the Word of Christ. Because wouldn't you want to know, what do I do here? What should I say here? What's really going on here? Wouldn't that be amazing? Well, I'll tell you that it is amazing, and it's not all just given. It's like, it's a relationship where you learn how to be in relationship with something that is somewhat unfathomable. And because that presence of God in you wants you to grow and wants you to express the Word, it has to train you to do so. It has to teach you, it has to guide you, it has to give you exercises that develop skills of concentration and develop skills of integration of yourself. And so that's what our path is here. You get exercises to practice stuff, and you know, step by step you open the channels to the ultimate reality of being able to consistently enter into meditation and hear that presence. And beyond that, other stuff occurs also. There's entering into the self. I wonder what that would be like. So it doesn't end there. But, I mean, this is the first chapter of the book of John, so he's just getting started, you know. He's coming out pretty strong. He's coming out of the gate strong, and, you know, that's why, you know, John is considered the most mystical of the apostles, because he just got it. He just understood it. So be alert to the word that you use. Be very hopeful that not one thing comes into being without the word. And if things that you seek are not coming into being, go, it must be that my word is conflicted with the word within. So let me seek to dig and uncover and dig and uncover, and please don't let me get frustrated and discouraged and disappointed by what I see. And help me to let go of those things that the inner Christ says, I'm not sure that would really work out for you. Let me be open to go, okay, well, if not that, what? So that sets you up to this place of proper humility, where you don't have to command that which you want and be so expecting God is going to deny it of you. Because actually, you could still go for stuff. You could still hammer your word home and probably manifest a lot of things. Would they be good or not for you? Well, I would rather run it by God and get the okay. Because it's kind of risky if I just go for things. But when most of us find the path, we've been doing that. We've been trying to hammer our word home and make it happen with our will. And some of that is positive, and some of it's a little misguided. But it's usually coming from a place of trying to create a life that we think is right for us. So in one of the songs it says, let us understand your plans for us. Let's be real simple. The plan that God has for you is to be in relationship with him/her/it. And if you haven't achieved that yet, then don't worry about what sort of weird mission you're going to be put upon, because it doesn't work that way. The plan is for you to be in relationship. And until that is deemed relatively consistent, that's the work. Now, as it becomes consistent, you're going to receive from that presence, and you'll begin to, just in your day-to-day life, your work life, your romance life, your family life, your personal health, your finances, whatever, you're going to begin to go, wait, let me check in and let me ask about that, and let me see what I can receive. So you'll begin to allow the will of God to influence that which you do. And as you progress and you realize that it works and you can see the ways in which you resist, then you refine, refine, refine. To a point where maybe God says, hey, I got an idea. How does this sit with you? What about you try this? At that point, you're like, well, you've been pretty solid since I really got into it, so I'm all ears. Keep in mind that you still can say, oh, I don't know, it brings up a lot of feeling for me. I was kind of hoping for this. And God's like, well, what if we did that first and then you can come back to this? You're like, I can work with that. I mean, that's what a relationship is like. It's like you get to express your feelings. And God is the best person when it comes to receiving feelings. Much better than we are. So you can expect that God will receive your feelings. And this is why in our courses we teach the difference between being in an emotionally reactive state and actually having a true connection to what feels right for you. Because if you communicate a certain sourness or a certain whininess that's emotional, the God in you might go like, come on, you're sounding a little bit like you're 12 years old right now. Let's really think about this. And that would be a good teaching. You go like, yeah, you're right. I was being a little bit of a punk there. As opposed to, wow, when I think about that, that really brings up a lot of fear and I'm not sure I understand that. So what do I do now? So, well, why don't you sit with it and let's explore what that is. Because it's not going to be good for you to try to push through a fear that has not been examined enough where you go, my choice is to be courageous and I'm going to do it anyway. So this becomes hopefully something you can't wait to go in and explore, daily. To go, hey, I want to run a few things by you. In the beginning, you do that a lot of times with the priest or other people in the community because you want a sounding board and you want some feedback. But ultimately, you'll be able to do this within. You'll still get guidance and help from Google and whatnot. But there'll be the affirmation from within because you have developed the relationship. Last thing I want to say about that is this really needs to be a top priority. This is when Jesus says God comes first. This is what it means. So I know most of you guys are pretty darn solid in your meditation practice, and that's great. And continue on with that. Many people come through the courses and they struggle to fit it in because, well, they got to have their coffee and shower, and they got to take care of the kids, and they got baseball and soccer, and then I got to go to my dancing class, and I got basketball and intramurals, and then I'm going to see my parents on the weekend. And everybody's got stuff like that. We've all got a menu of things that we have to do. Just make your desire to know God, at the top, and watch what happens.